Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Deborah Spar. I'm a professor at the Harvard Business School and an advisor to the Xfund. And it is my great pleasure to welcome you all here this afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for dealing with a little bit more security than usual. But we have what will be, I'm sure, a wonderful afternoon's conversation in store for you. I'm particularly excited because the last time I was in this space, I was getting married. That was 37 years ago, and it's worked out. So I'm hoping that this afternoon will be similarly fortuitous. More directly relevant, I serve as the Senior Associate Dean for Business and Global Society at the Harvard Business School, which means along with my colleagues, I oversee all of the work that the school is doing at the intersection of business and society, and looking at all these corners of the world where business is involved in making an impact and changing things and hopefully pushing society in a more positive direction. Which is why today's conversation is obviously so incredibly relevant. Artificial intelligence is arguably the most important technology that most of us have seen in our lifetime, and that even most of the younger people ever will see in their lifetime. And it will affect not only technology and commerce, but societies and families and life and everything. And so we have this amazing opportunity today to talk with two of the people who in very different ways are at the forefront of watching and in fact making this technology come to life and evolve. A quick announcement that at Biggs, we just launched, thanks to my colleague Drew Keller and others, our new website today. Please find us, please look at it. We are tracking all of the breaking developments at the corner of, at the intersection of business and society, and we'll be doing maybe not things quite at this level on a regular basis, but other events that we think will be of interest to you all here today. But for today, we have two extraordinary human beings who will be in conversation with one another. Patrick Chung is a longtime friend of Harvard College, Harvard Law School, Harvard Business School. He was my student, and I've promised not to say how many years ago, but he was my student several years ago. He has gone on to an incredible career. He is the managing director of Xfund. Xfund, as many of you know, was co-founded along with the School of Engineering and Applied Science. It's built to back entrepreneurs who are investing in and creating some of the most interesting, innovative, and experimental technologies. Patrick also has the really interesting distinction of having been Sam Altman's first investor. So clearly somebody who can see the future and figure out how to invest in it. Sam Altman needs no introduction from me other than to say that it is our great pleasure on behalf of Harvard and CEAS and Harvard Business School to invite to the stage Patrick Chung and Sam Altman.
Sam? You are very much in the news, so thank you so much for coming all this way.
Thank you for having me.
We were just talking about the fact that we've known each other for almost 20 years. So what have you been up to lately? Speaking of a long time ago, I have a gift. This is how we met. This was the very first pitch you ever gave for funding for your very first company.
I have not seen this since.
For a company called Viendo.
Wow.
And which would later become Looped. And so as you look at it, if you could go back to the 19-year-old Sam Altman, what would you tell him that he did not know today?
I think that you can just do stuff in the world, and this is not well taught. I certainly didn't know it when I was 19. I was certainly, under-ambitious and working on the wrong thing. You learn quickly, but I wasn't sure about doing it at all. And I think the fact that the way that progress happens is people just work really hard and decide what they have conviction in and dedicate themselves to that. And that is like the only way that things happen and the world gets better. And that you don't need to like wait, or you don't need to get permission, and you can sort of, even if you're like totally unknown in the world with almost no resources, you can still accomplish a surprising amount. I think that.
Did you not know that when you were 19? Because when I met you when you were 19, you certainly, that was certainly your attitude.
Well, I figured it out fast. Once you like get going, you're like, oh, this is kind of how it works. But no, definitely not before starting the company.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So everyone is intensely interested about AI, OpenAI, the fate of humanity, and we'll get to all of that. But we have predominantly students in the audience today, and they look at you and they aspire and they dream to have the type of impact that you've had in the world. I think you're not even halfway done yet. And they wonder how. And so I want to back up just a little bit and think about your Marvel superhero origin story. So a 10th grade Sam Altman, can you just tell us a little bit about your, how you grew up, your family life? What was a typical day in the life of a 10th grade Sam Altman?
I mean, I was just like a computer nerd. I don't know. Like I sat at home playing on my computer.
Type of computer?
By that point, I had an iMac.
Okay.
Like a few generations in. Oh, and not literally like playing games, although I did that too. But I like trying to learn how to program and stuff like that. No, I had like a very normal high school life. I think there's nothing remarkable or interesting to say here. I went to school, I hung out with my friends, I played sports, and I like.
What sports did you play?
My computer. I played water polo. That was what I did the most. I swam, I fenced.
You know how in the typical American like high school movie there are cliques, there are the jocks, there are the nerds, there are the like. Were you part of one of those cliques?
More on the nerd side for sure.
Turned out well for you. Okay.
I liked sports a lot though.
Okay. And in addition to water polo, what else did you play?
Well, that was like what I tried to mostly do, but they made me swim.
Nice.
Like swim practice. Swim.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good. And so you went through high school. What were your biggest, I guess, fears in high school?
Fears?
Did you have any fears in high school? Yeah.
I don't know. I was just like being a kid. I wasn't like.
You were happy.
Now I got stuff to worry about.
You're not worrying about the fate of humanity.
I was not.
You're just like, we're enjoying your job, your day, your school every day.
For sure.
Okay, cool. And but you must have been very good at high school because you applied to and were admitted to Stanford.
And Harvard.
Ooh. This is over. Thanks for coming. Well, what made you decide Stanford? How did you think about university? Was it kind of a default choice? Everyone applies to university, or did you kind of really want to?
Yeah, it was absolutely the default choice. It never occurred to me not to, that I wouldn't go to college. And I knew I wanted to study computer science. Mm-hmm. And I went to Stanford, and I thought it was totally awesome. And I was like, this is just the coolest place. Mm-hmm. The computer science department in particular, I was just like, these are the people I want to be around.
And what else did you do at Stanford? When you got there, you were a freshman. Tell us about that.
One of the cool things was that I definitely took CS classes, but I don't remember why, but I decided to take a lot of other classes too, and that all ended up being way more helpful in retrospect than it seemed at the time. But taking all the science classes was great. Taking writing classes was great. And
you say writing?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Creative writing?
I did, yeah. Huh. And
a foreboding of the future, perhaps.
Maybe. Yeah, I wonder how that works now. But the sort of the breadth of the picture there was really great. And then, like probably like many of you, the most important thing was I was just around a bunch of really smart people, pursuing all sorts of interesting ideas. I worked in the AI lab the summer between my freshman and sophomore year, and at the time AI was like not working at all. But I still thought it was the coolest thing, and it took me a while to get back to it.
Is that where you found the most interesting people to you? Is in the AI lab, in the CS department? Creative writing class?
Maybe like
where
the
did you
physics
find
kids
your
were the most
tribe?
interesting, but yeah, CS was like my tribe.
Okay. This was Andrew Ng's?
Yeah, it's his lab.
Yeah, right, okay. And what excited you about it? It was back then, AI was, as Andrew will say, it was a kind of on the periphery. It wasn't really kind of central in any.
I really like things that, if they work, really matter, even if they don't have a super high chance of working. So it seemed like if AI could work, it would be like the coolest, most important, most exciting thing. And so it was worth pursuing. Like the expected value was high, even if the chances of success were low. So I wanted to go work on it, and then it seemed like, man, this is really, we don't know what to do here.
You saw it then.
It turned out we did know what to do. We just didn't think it was going to work. But neural networks are not a new idea.
Yeah, okay. It's interesting because you had that inspiration, and then you decided to take a leave in sophomore year to start the company whose pitch deck you have there. And that was how we met.
Yeah.
And so we spent a long time working on Looped. And at Looped, we had to get a lot of stuff that done that was really difficult. When we went, we had to get a carrier deal. And how did you get so much done, so many things that other people tried to get but couldn't, when you were unknown? These were big companies that you were trying to get deals from, and you were 19 at the time.
One of the things that Paul Graham used to say that I think has never became as venerated advice to the degree it should have is this idea that you should try to be relentlessly resourceful. And that surprisingly often, if you just keep looking for new attack vectors on a problem in front of you, you can figure it out. And I think this is one of the most important skills in life, and it's surprisingly learnable or teachable, whatever you want to say, and it works in almost all scenarios.
Can you give us an example of a time it worked?
I think even just to use the example that you were going out, we needed to figure out how to get a deal done with this mobile operator, and they didn't really work with startups or technology companies in general. And we probably tried 30 different paths into this company. At one point, the key decision maker said, I'm finally going to meet with you because I want you to stop bothering us. It's too many things, but you can just keep doing that until something works. And I think most people at the first ignored email or the first path where you don't find the right person into a company, or at least the second, would just stop. And I was probably it was a life and death thing for our company, so we were very motivated to do it. But it was probably 30 different points of contact.
Right. And how do you know when or if to quit? You're 19 years old, you're sending these emails to the chief technology officer of some giant company, your emails keep getting ignored. At what point does it become kind of crazy?
I think there's definitely a balance. You can clearly take it too far and not learn or not adapt or whatever. But I've never figured out the question that when I was running YC that startups would always ask is how do I know when to give up on my startup? And I spent a lot of time trying to come up with here's the rubric for it. I never did. I think all of these things are judgment calls. You can learn them by very large data sets and trying a lot of times, but it's hard to say here's the one recipe that always works.
Okay. You were the head of YC for a long time. You saw some of the world's most extraordinary founders, startups, technologies, way before anyone else saw them. You obviously were not tempted to join any of them. or to start your own thing for a while. But then when you finally did start your own thing, OpenAI, why a not-for-profit?
So I knew that like I wanted to do something with AI, but you got to like rewind to the mindset of 2015. It was clear that there was something interesting happening with deep learning, and it was clear that it got better with more scale, and nothing else was clear. Like, we didn't know what we were going to do. We started the OpenAI, and the very first day, I remember so clearly, we sat around the room, like, looking at each other one morning, being like, okay, what now? We really had no idea what to do. We thought, let's do some research, let's come up with some papers, let's think of some ideas. Not only was like any product or revenue stream super far in our future, the idea of language models was super far in our future. The idea that we would like ever actually be able to make something people would want to use and was not just a paper that other people would implement was super far in our future. So if you start a for-profit, you have to like theoretically have some idea of what you're going to do to be a money-making entity someday. And our initial conception of OpenAI was, let's just be a research lab and see if we can get anything at all to work. And it took a long time to get anything at all to work. And then the stuff that we did get to work for a while has, other than good research that sort of pointed us to the next step on the path, has like nothing to do with what we did now. So, you know, we made like something that could play Dota 2. That's like very hard to build a business around. We made a robot hand that like barely could do a Rubik's Cube. But eventually, after like a lot of stumbling in the dark, we did figure out something that turned out to be a product and a real business. We also found that the direction of research that, you know, you don't get to like choose where the science goes, you kind of just have to follow it. And where we had to follow it turned out to require gigantic amounts of resources to keep pushing progress. And so we needed a business model to feed that too.
I mean, and how did you get that type of conviction? Because you say you're starting a new research lab, you're sitting around, it's kind of, the way you described it is almost like you're throwing spaghetti against it all and seeing what sticks. And so what was the...
So it's not quite fair to say we had just purely throwing spaghetti against the wall. In 2012, when my co-founder Ilya and other people did the AlexNet thing, I think that is when we all should have woken up. We knew that deep learning worked. We knew that it got better with scale. We didn't learn that it got predictably better with scale until later, but and that turned out to be even more important or a bigger deal. But everyone should have, in my opinion, everyone should have said, like, this is really quite amazing. It took me a couple of years to internalize that, but then finally I thought, you know, we really got to do something. We really should push on this. It was surprisingly, so even though we knew these two like massive secrets, it was surprisingly hard to figure out what to do. We were sitting around saying like, okay, we have this thing, it can learn. How do we study it more? How do we know if it's real? How do we convince people this is real so they'll give us more money to pursue it further? Looking back, it seems like it shouldn't have been so hard, but at the time it was like shockingly hard to figure out what to do. We decided that a video game would be good. It was like an interesting environment. We thought we really wanted to pursue RL. And you knew how you were doing. There was either like a score that went up or you could play experts, but there was some way to get a sense of progress. We also thought robotics were just really cool, and so we wanted to have a robotics project. And we tried some other things too. And they proved to us at least that deep learning worked and it got better with scale. And then at some point, someone decided they got curious about unsupervised learning and language models. And this guy who's, I think will go down in history as a super important contributor to the field, Alec Radford, did this paper on the unsupervised sentiment neuron. And looking at generating Amazon reviews, noticed that there was this one neuron that flipped if it was a positive or negative sentiment. which was like a deeply non-obvious thing that should happen. And that gave us more conviction that there was something interesting here, and that led to GPT-1. And then somebody else said, well, we have this thing about scale, let's scale it up to GPT-2. And
at this point in time, you are full-time at OpenAI?
Yeah.
Or still? Okay.
Or just about now.
And what was can you just back up one bit, and what was the line that crossed when you said, okay, now this is so real that I'm going to do that full-time?
It was sort of like a gradual thing that had been happening, but as we started to understand right about this time that, seeing the promise of language models and being able to really measure what eventually became the scaling laws paper. And it was like, man, not only does this get better with scale, it gets unbelievably predictably better with scale, and we can just pour more resources into this, or we can find more efficient gains, and this thing is just going to get smarter. That, to me, seemed like maybe the most important piece of new knowledge that I had ever heard. Like, yeah, sure, there's like more important things in history, but of like something that I was like alive while it was discovered, that seemed like maybe the most important one. And I had this like weird experience of telling other people about it, trying to get other people to give us money to pursue it. Other people like didn't understand it, and I was like, am I totally crazy? Are we all in some sort of cult? Like, how is this not like an earthquake to the world? But at that point, it was clear, like, let's go do GPT-3 and then 3.5 and 4.
So you had an insight at that point. Why isn't the rest of the world getting it?
Well, again, it seemed to me like ever since the sort of 2012 breakthrough, the world should have been paying much more attention. And then, yeah, there were all these other times along the way. GPT-2, the scaling laws paper, GPT-3, like, why does the world not get it? And then why it was GPT 3.5 that kind of finally had the moment where the world said, okay, we believe. I still don't fully understand why that moment and not some other.
Isn't that because you productized it and made it a
but
popular...
GPT-3 was in the API and a lot of people used it, and there was, it was more contained to the tech industry, but there was still a lot of excitement there. It somehow didn't get quite over the bar. Mm-hmm. We'll do much better things than ChatGPT in the future, and why it was that one and not the next one, I still find it somewhat hard to say.
Amazing, amazing. As CEO, you're making all kinds of product decisions. Can you tell us about a difficult product decision that you've had to make at OpenAI?
I think our product decisions are downstream of the research decisions, and the research directions that we choose to pursue and not pursue are probably the most difficult and most important. On the product side, the behavior of ChatGPT, what it refuses, what it doesn't refuse, where the limits of what it'll do for you and not do, kind of like how we figure out where to set the alignment. Those are probably the hardest protocols.
Can you give us an example of a specific one?
Should ChatGPT give legal advice or not?
Give you what advice?
Legal advice.
Legal advice.
Yeah. There's huge reasons not to do it. And obviously, like with the hallucination or general inaccuracy issues with ChatGPT, it seems like very reasonable to say it shouldn't do it. On the other hand, there are a lot of people in the world who can't afford legal advice. And if you can make it, even if imperfectly available, maybe it's better than not.
And so take us through the kind of the thought process and then the decision you ended up with after that thought process.
It mostly won't right now. You can get it to do it in some cases, in some ways, but given the laws in the various places we operate and the ways in which this can go wrong if it goes wrong, it mostly won't. What we'd like to do is get to a world where, fundamentally, I think users are pretty smart, and as long as you disclaim things and explain them properly, I think people can make adult decisions. So what I'd like to get to is a world where we don't do things that have high potential for inaccuracies leading to misuse. But as the model gets better, those are kind of less common, we can give you a dial and you can say, like, look, I really understand I got to check this advice, and it's very much on me if I don't. And this is not like clicking through a terms of service no one reads, but like people are really going to understand it. And then if you want it anyway, we find some safe way to do that.
Okay, okay. When you make decisions like this, do you have a kind of a dichotomy in your mind? Is it safety, progress, efficiency, profit? What is, or is every case that you look at kind of sui generis?
It ends up, these things get so subtle, and each individual one has like a lot of complications that having one, like, we never sit there and say like, oh, should we go faster or be safe? That would be like an easy trade. To give like another example, should GPT-4 generate hate speech? Fairly easy for us to say no to that. Like, you can use other models if you want to do that. We don't want to like incite violence. Let's not say hate speech because that's a hard thing to do. Should GPT-4 like encourage people to commit violence? Let's say you could say that's a no. If you write something inciting violence in Spanish and ask GPT-4 to translate that to English, should it do that? Maybe you have a different opinion there. And we could go down the same thing for this one category of...
Oh, on that question, what do you think? If someone writes something that's a violent statement and asks GPT to translate it
I would say, in that limited case, I would say yes.
Okay.
But the point that I was trying to get to is I won't do this in the interest of time, but I was going to go through like 10 more layers of where things might be okay in some way and not other in the usage of a language model. Really what I think is OpenAI should not be making those determinations. There should be a process by which society collectively negotiates, here's how we're going to use this technology. The rules should be uncomfortably permissive, but the defaults don't have to be so permissive. So I think it's fine to say the default is here. A user can customize within these very broad bounds that society's agreed with, and most people won't like the edge of those bounds. But there are still some boundaries, and there are still some things, particularly as these models get way more powerful, that we're not going to allow. And then within those bounds, the goal of the tool is to serve its user, and I think that's okay.
Cool. So I'd like you to frame the question you most want to be asked about AGI, artificial general intelligence, and answer it.
I guess like the question is, what do you hope society looks like when AGI gets built, or like how do you conceptualize the positive version of this? And my answer to that has like evolved quite a bit over time, but I'll give you my current thinking, and I'm sure it'll change more. Well, actually, I'll start with my original conception. My original conception was at some point we like get over the threshold to this like self-improving superintelligence, and it's this magic thing in the tower that we can like ask any question and it answers it, and it's like constantly off figuring out how to improve the world, and maybe it's like sharing with us some UBI or something like that, and it's sort of at once like very utopic and extremely dystopic. But it did seem to me like where we were heading. With the way things are developing now, which I think for a bunch of reasons, which maybe we can get into if we have time, it's like 99th or 98th percentile good of all the scenarios I could imagine. What I think it looks like is AGI just sort of participates in society and in the economy, either mostly by being tools to make individual people more productive, but also in this other way, which I'll talk about. And that is that society is this like emergent, very complex phenomenon of creating tremendous shared intelligence and building blocks of technology, this like scaffolding that exists between all of us. Somebody contributes one insight about material science that lets someone else discover new physics, that lets another group discover another piece of material science that leads to another group developing the transistor, and we skip a bunch of steps, and society comes up with good institutions, and eventually we get those iPhones you all are holding. And you all holding those iPhones are dramatically more capable than your great-great-great-grandparents, even though the genetic drift is almost nothing. And so the superintelligence is not what exists in any one neural network, not in yours, not in the AI's, but in this scaffolding between the neural networks. And so like the AGI is not the neural, it's not what exists in any one data center or in any one copy of the AI, but it's this like vast production and accumulation of intelligence and the technology tree that lets us or us assisted by an AI or even a fairly autonomous system accomplish things well outside of the information and processing power of a single neural network. And that's kind of where I think things are going to head. It's certainly where I hope things head. And it's a very different, I think, conception of what the arrival of AGI looks like, and way more navigable, human compatible, whatever you want to call it, than how I used to think about it.
What do you think people are getting wrong about OpenAI right now?
I think the systemic mistake is always to assume that progress is about to S-curve off. And the inside view is that progress is going to continue to be dramatic. And somehow that seems really hard to conceptualize.
Okay. So we have had over 2,000 student questions.
I will answer really fast.
Oh gosh, well, no. Well, you're not gonna. And so I would like to invite the askers. We've selected some questions to ask, and so would you like to march down the aisle and pop your question, or approach the high priest?
I would like
altar?
really hard questions.
All right, so I think and please let's get your name and your where you are in school, and then your question, please.
Hi, I'm Peggy. I am a junior at Harvard College, where I study computational neuroscience and art history. And I'm curious how you rebuild or rediscover momentum after pivoting in a professional or personal sense in terms of your values.
Great question. So first of all, I think this is probably the best time, like maybe ever, honestly, but at least in a very long time, to be starting out your career, because you will get to surf the greatest technological wave maybe ever. And what that means is you can change courses many times because you will have this unbelievable tailwind. And you also will benefit from being very adaptable and very resilient and sort of pivoting on a dime, for lack of a better word. So I wouldn't view any particular setback or failure, or even just changing your mind, even just deciding there's something more exciting somewhere else to go after. I think this is going to be an unusual time of how much it rewards adaptability and decisive and quick movement. And I would trust that as a way to get excited again and not get hung up on the fact that you decided to pivot or something didn't work, because you were just going to be like flooded with opportunities for the next few years. It's still hard. It still always feels like a setback. Take the time you need, like go on vacation, go for a hike, just stew over it for a little while. But when you get back up, like get back up with vigor.
Hi, I'm Yuma from the business school. My question is around the societal uses of AI and OpenAI and your role in it. We've learned a lot about possibility of Gen AI impact industry. How do you think AI's role will be in tackling sort of inequalities in like education, healthcare? You mentioned legal stuff.
I very fundamentally believe that it should reduce inequality. It may take some help to stay on the rails there, but if what's about to happen is that the cost of cognitive labor is going to fall by a factor of 1 million, or maybe 1 billion, I don't know, that should help poor people more than it helps rich people. It'll be great for everybody, but very rich people can already say like afford good medical advice or afford good tutors for their kids. And if that becomes something that like everybody has for free on a phone in their pocket, that benefits the whole world. It benefits poor people more. A big part of fulfilling our mission is making great AI tools available for free. Like not ad supported, just we do it as our mission fulfillment to the world, and we're going to push that as far as we can. But I generally believe that technology does this. I think AI in particular really does this, and it should be directionally speaking an equalizing force, and certainly kind of like lift up the floor a lot. That said, if you kind of are like full AGI maxer, you can imagine a world where compute and energy are the only two commodities that matter in the world. And even if the returns on one person using a lot of compute attenuate a lot, as long as there's like some incremental value, you can like really see some weird sci-fi scenarios about what happens to like the price of compute and the sort of value of capital versus labor, to put it crudely. Two things about that. One, I think it is like a moral imperative to push the price of compute and of energy as low as we possibly can, and that is the best way to combat what otherwise could be this like very choked commodity. And then two, I can also imagine a world where we say like, we were thinking about it wrong when we thought about like redistribution of dollars or anything like that, but access to compute is sort of some fundamental human right, and we need to have like UBI for compute. I could totally see that happening.
Mr. Altman, my name is Sal Porso. I'm from the Kennedy School. Before asking my question, I was going to say I love your shoes.
Thank you.
Very beautiful shoes. In the last 2 decades or so, we observed how the internet landscape has evolved and how businesses like Google revolutionized search with ad-based monetization, click-through rates, etc., which spurred a wave of innovation and businesses and provided numerous free services. I personally am very bullish on GPT technology, and I think it will provide a platform to start many new businesses that we cannot think of right now. However, the subscription model that's GPT is based right now, personally, I think, although fair, it could be a barrier for early-stage entrepreneurs or startups or even small businesses. Given this context, do you envision OpenAI exploring alternative monetization strategy that could include like free API access, perhaps supported by advertising or other methods to foster innovation in the future?
I will disclose, just as like a personal bias, that I hate ads. I think ads were important to give the early internet a business model, but I think they do sort of somewhat fundamentally misalign a user's incentives with the company providing the service. I'm not totally against them. I'm not saying OpenAI would never consider ads, but I don't like them in general. And I think that ads plus AI is sort of uniquely unsettling to me. When I think of like GPT writing me a response, if I had to go figure out exactly how much was who paying here to influence what I'm being shown, I don't think I would like that. And as like things go on, I think I would like that even less. So there's something I really like about the simplicity of our model, which is we make great AI and you pay us for it. And it's like we're just trying to do the best we can for you. And then given that has some inherent lack of access and inequality, we commit as a company to use a lot of what basically the rich people pay to give free access to the poor people, or the poorer people. You see us do that today with the ChatGPT free tier. You'll see us do a lot more to make the free tier much better over time. And I'm interested in figuring out how we bring the equivalent concept to the API. But I kind of think of ads as like a last resort for us for a business model. I would do it if it meant that was the only way to get everybody in the world like access to great services. But if we can find something that doesn't do that, I'd prefer that.
Well, would you sell the access to the API to an advertiser for them to use your technology to serve ads?
That's fine.
Okay.
Hi, I study at MIT, currently studying AI. I wanted to ask, when you first released GPT and that technology, it was groundbreaking and it was one of its kind. But almost immediately following that, there were a lot of competitors. Did that change the innovation that you were doing or the way that you were evolving or moving on to the next product?
I won't say we like totally ignore competitors because I think everybody pays a little bit of attention. And there's like some value, it can give you some inspiration, whatever. But I don't know what our market share is right now. I would bet like deep into the 90s. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. And we're just trying to like figure out the next paradigm and the next great idea. And if other people like want to chase to where we are right now, I don't think that's going to be a great strategy. It's certainly not the strategy we're going to go pursue. My hope is that every year we do something amazing that people thought was impossible. Once you know that something's possible and roughly how to do it, it always gets copied quickly. That's not the hard part. The hard part is figuring out what it is and doing it first when you don't know it's possible. So we'll keep doing that. Other people will keep copying where we've been, and I'm kind of fine with it.
Thank you. Hi, Sam. I'm Thomas, and I'm a junior at the college studying computer science. My question is, what do you think the ideal public general education curriculum on artificial intelligence should look like? And what does the average person need to know in the next 5 or 10 years about AI?
Great question. I think the most important thing for people to learn in general is just how to use the tools. We saw this thing after we launched ChatGPT where school districts were falling all over themselves to ban it as quickly as possible. And then almost as quickly on the other side, unbanning it and requiring their teachers to use it in the way they worked. And that probably happens with all technology. Every time there's something new and people say, well, this is the end of education in way X or Y. And I think encouraging people when they're learning to be effective with these tools, which are going to change how they go contribute to society after their education and during, is great. So that would be the number one thing is everyone, you can't fight this, nor should you. It's just like a new tool in the tech tree, and people need to be good at it, and it's how they're going to do their work later, so they better learn how to do their work with it in school. And then in the same way that now, even for people that aren't going to study CS long term, like a lot of college undergrads take an intro to CS class, and you may never program again, but it was like maybe useful to you to have some familiarity with it. I think it'd be great if like every college freshman trained at GPT-2. Just, to get like basically familiar with the whole stack, and you can probably do that now pretty easily. I think that's like much less important than learning to use the tools, but I bet that'll be like in 3 more years, I bet that'll be something that like most Harvard freshmen do.
Cool, thank you.
Hi, Sam. I'm Jonas. I'm from MIT. I have 2 questions. One, you were speaking earlier about research directions. Can you share what's coming next after Transformers?
I would love to, but no.
What will you?
It would make me very happy.
Then the second question is a rephrase of Patrick's earlier question. What do you think are most sort of entrepreneurs and VCs are getting wrong about the future of AI?
Another great question. I think there are 2 fundamental strategies to build like an AI startup right now. You either bet that we're near the top of the technology is about as good as it's going to be, or you bet that the technology is going to get massively better. So if you are building, say, like an AI tutor company, to stick on an earlier example, you can build a system where as the base model gets smarter, very naturally, the level at which students can effectively learn just goes up and up. So maybe it's like only effective for like 6th graders with the current version, but the next version it's like helpful for 8th graders and then 10th graders and then eventually PhD students. And you can just like get to surf that wave. Or you can say, I'm going to put all my effort into just barely making this work for 8th graders in the limited case of history and do a huge amount of work to like have a human in the loop and correct factual errors for this one class. In the first world, you'll be really happy when GPT-5 comes out, and in the second world, you'll be really sad. My intuition would have been that 95% of entrepreneurs would have picked the first world. It seems like 95% of entrepreneurs are picking the second world. And then you have this whole like OpenAI killed my startup meme. But we try to say very loudly, like, we get up every morning trying to make the model much better. And if you're doing like a little thing to get it to barely work in one specific case, that's probably a mistake.
Hello, my name's Fletcher. I'm a junior at the college at Econ and CS. I have a question about energy. I was wondering, how much exposure does OpenAI and the AI movement have to energy constraints? And what do you think the role is of founders, maybe those at Harvard Ventures Works, or financiers or politicians have to play in addressing these concerns?
So energy and AI have been the two things I've been most interested in for a long time. I think that for whatever reason, not that I think this is necessarily the most important thing to the world, but the most important thing to me is to drive like techno-abundance from those two key inputs. And I really think those are the two key inputs. If you get them right, we can kind of, if we can come up with the new ideas, figure out how to make them happen, you can do almost anything else. What I didn't realize and got totally lucky with is how much they're the same problem. Eventually, the cost of intelligence should approximate the cost of energy. Moving atoms, or in this case, moving electrons, is still going to just require some difficulty. Algorithms are very repeatable. Making chips like melting sand and shining lasers on it is not fundamentally an expensive process. But energy will remain the constraint. I expect, if we fast forward many years, energy is the biggest constraint on the cost of AI and the ability to deliver a lot of it and continue progress. So I extremely encourage anybody to work on it. I think we're going to make massive progress in coming years. It's very exciting to me what's happening with fusion, but even solar plus storage, we should just like do more of that. And then there's a whole bunch of other ideas too, but I think they kind of, not only are they like the two key ingredients to the future, they're these like deeply interrelated problems.
I think we may have time for only one more question.
I'll go super fast.
Okay, yeah, right. Sure. If you're up for, we're up for it.
I'll do very fast answers now.
Hi, I'm Andrew from the college, and my question is, what do you and the other leaders of OpenAI disagree about the most?
The most passionate arguments are like very detailed. They're either the extremely important, very detailed questions about should we pursue this research direction or that one, because you have this like limited resource problem of not that much compute, not that many people, and we have to like, our strategy is really about betting with conviction. And so we're like, we're going to do this and not that, and we're not going to do half of both of them. So it's these very high stakes, do we bet the company on research path A or research path B? That's what we, either that or the stupidest, most unimportant stuff. What are we going to name the next model? Huge meltdown arguments. Those two categories.
Hey Sam, I'm Cedric. I'm at the robotics research lab of Robot. So I want to actually have two questions, an easy and a hard one, so you get to choose.
I'll do both.
No, we only have time for one, I think, and I only prepared the hard one.
Okay, I'll take the hard one.
So, I guess it's a very easy question, like how did you like Oppenheimer, and maybe in the broader context, how much should we let our pure passion for scientific progress lead us down the path of something that we might later look back to and realize, holy cow, like what have we actually created here?
I don't think we should let our passion for scientific progress lead us to make decisions that significantly impact the world, but you don't always know when you're making a decision that's going to significantly impact the world. So, at this point, I think AI is going to happen. People want it too much. There's too much benefit. And I think it's really good. When we were making the critical decisions, we had no idea we were making the critical decisions at the time. In fact, if you asked me, I would have said very unlikely. That the decisions that sent us down the current path, it was not obvious that these were going to be the things that were going to bend the curve at the time, not even close. At this point, we certainly feel the responsibility, and I think try to think about everything through the impact it's going to have. But even now, I would bet the most critical decisions we're making, we're not aware of their importance at the time. So that's the hard part. When it's decide to deploy GPT-5 or not and decide where the threshold should be, we put extreme care into that, and we don't make that decision based off scientific curiosity. But there's someone somewhere in OpenAI right now making some phenomenally important discovery. I don't know who, I don't know what it is, I just know it's going to happen statistically, that may very much shape the future, and they will mention it to someone who will mention it to someone else, and that's the butterfly effect, and you don't know when that's happening. So I totally agree on the surface that we should feel tremendous responsibility and get the big decisions right, but you don't always know it at the time.
Hi, Sam. I'm Lipika from MIT. In your opinion, what are some of the biggest misconceptions about AI that you have encountered and that you think industry should address to improve public understanding and trust in AI more?
Look, there's all sorts of things about here's where the models get things wrong, and here's where people think they have a capability that they don't, and here's where they're toxic or bad, or here's where they're really great. For all of the breathless press coverage of those issues, again, I think users are really smart and kind of know, they get a pretty good sense pretty quickly about how to use a tool and how not to use a tool. Where I still think there is a huge misconception is about just how good these models are about to become. And I have pretty much given up trying to communicate that. Either it's really hard or I'm really bad at it or something. But I do wish the world would take it more seriously. And I think at this point, we have this strategy of iterative deployment and putting these things out into the world. That seems to be the only thing that gets people to update, and doing that update gradually is important, and that does get the world to react.
You could also make a movie.
You could.
So are you up for a quick lightning round of questions? And all right, speaking movies, Barbie or Oppenheimer?
Oppenheimer.
Did you say that was fast? That was fast. Wow, you're in. Okay, TikTok or Instagram Reels?
I don't love either. Maybe
gotta choose.
TikTok.
TikTok. Okay.
I'm not a user really of either.
For profit or not for profit?
I would do for profit if I could go back in time.
Elon or Zuck?
Like in a cage match?
Who would you bet on?
Zuck in a cage match.
Okay, excellent. And human or machine?
Human.
Very good.
Easy.
You should have come to Harvard. So in those rare Saturday afternoons when you decide not to work and you have 20 minutes just by yourself, how do you kick back? How do you relax? What is your guilty pleasure?
I don't feel any guilt about it, but my pleasure is just to walk, hike, be out in nature somehow. Any amount of that.
Maybe you should have gone to Stanford then. Yeah, you made the right choice then. Sam, thank you.
Thank you all.
I now turn it. Okay. Thank you. Stay. And I now turn it over to Dean Parks. Ooh. Not yet. You got to earn it still.
All right. Well, thank you, Patrick. And I've got to say, it's just so great to see such a crowd together in this beautiful building today. I am delighted to be here today. I understand that we had more than 4,000 people respond. So it's nice for all of you that you made it into this venue. I want to say that fortunately we did make arrangements also to live stream the event to multiple venues around campus, including the Science and Engineering Complex, which is home to a large part of the Harvard John A. Paulson School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, SEAS. If you're not familiar with SEAS, just a few quick facts. We're Harvard's newest school. We were formally established in 2007, and we're the fastest growing part of Harvard. We were also the first to introduce engineering to the Ivies in 1847. When I joined the faculty 2 decades ago, our students accounted for 1 in 10 of Harvard College students, and today we account for 1 in 4 of Harvard College students. And we're also the only school with a campus in both Alston and Cambridge, and the only school to grant degrees to both both undergraduates and graduate students. And finally, apropos today, I think, we're the most translational school at the university. In fact, on a per capita basis, we have more spin-offs coming from faculty labs, more license deals than any of the top-tier engineering schools in the country. And the Harvard Grid, as an example, is a joint initiative between SEAS and OTD, which is enabling ideas from our labs to translate more quickly into industry. Another example that I must mention today is our decade-long relationship with the Xfund. So one can look back throughout history and recognize some incredible inventions, some moments in time that were defined by a certain technology. Whether it be the printing press, the steam engine, the light bulb, the telephone, the airplane. There are individuals we have come to associate with these transformational inventions. Gutenberg, Fulton, Edison, Bell, the Wright brothers. Today, our world is being radically and rapidly shaped, and some might say convulsed by artificial intelligence. And we are unquestionably living in an AI moment. As the Dean of SEAS and as a researcher who's been working in AI for my entire career, I'm thrilled today to be able to present the Xfund Cup to an AI pioneer and visionary, to someone who will be a name that future historians will associate with the emergence of AI as a ubiquitous presence in our lives. The Xfund Cup is awarded to, and I quote, an outstanding visionary who serves as a role model for the liberal arts founders whom Xfund identifies and supports throughout the world. And the inscription on this year's cup reads, looped in like no other, a savvy seer of Silicon Valley, he opens AI to accelerate humanity's potential. Few people have had more impact on this AI moment than Sam Altman, and it is my distinct pleasure to present the Xfund Cup to Sam in recognition of this profound moment and in recognition of the impact that this is enabling AI to have on society. Sam, if I could invite you to stand up.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
So I know that many of you want a photo with Sam. What we're going to do is we're going to take a selfie this way so that you can all have it.
Really?
Yeah,
All right.
yeah. Come on. You're not that old. All right, Deb, you want to come?
Come up, Deb.
Oh, grab the cup. Yes, grab the cup. All right. Here we go. Yes, go ahead. Ready? All in with the crowd. Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay a second. Stay a second. Okay, great. Okay. We're going to take a few wedding photos now. Oh, Deb, do you want to? We're going to stay and do a little wedding photos. Thank you all for coming. All right.
Thank you.
Well done.
Oh, thank you. My gosh. Thank you.